title this morning is A Church Without Walls. And it's something kind of near and dear to my heart. First time I heard about this was a man by the name of Tom Bandy. Tom Bandy is a church consultant, has been around for a lot of years, even more years than I have, and is still working though. And he presented a seminar when I was in seminary about 12 years ago called A Church Without Walls. And it was a revolutionary idea to me at that time. I had not heard the terminology. Anyway, what I'd like to do is just share with you two kinds of churches. One is a church in residence. Now, church in residence, there's nothing wrong with it, but a church in residence has certain characteristics. And then there's the church without walls that has certain characteristics. And basically, it's an understanding and a different way of consciousness, if you would, that both churches operate. The majority of churches in the United States, even today, are still churches in residence. And let me tell you some of the characteristics of a church in residence. Number one, they are usually more concerned about their building, about where they are meeting, than they are about bringing people in. Interesting thing. And they're still interested in people coming in. Don't misunderstand me. But their major concern is usually the building, the maintenance, the finances, those kinds of things, which are important. But they take over for the church in residence. The church in residence sometimes means to be inclusive, but is actually exclusive, especially the smaller churches. They don't really want to grow. They say they do. One of the things we were told when we went out to look for churches, when we came out of ministry school, was every church will say we want to grow, but many of them do not. And so interview them also as to their real desire. Because sometimes it's comfortable to remain whatever size that church has to be. And that can happen in any size church, by the way. Any size church can be comfortable and not want to grow anymore for whatever reasons. And it is a consciousness, a collective consciousness of that particular group. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that a church in residence usually is mostly concerned, and Unity kind of built this culture over the years, it's changed and changing, that we take care of our people first. That we take care of ourselves first, actually. That what we want to do is we get this idea and we get this commitment to growing in spirit, and it's wonderful. Don't ever stop doing that. But at the same time, it becomes everything. And then when you notice some people come for a while and their eyes actually change. I mean, they look brighter, and then they stop coming because they think they've done the work they're supposed to do. And so a church in residence will have some turnover of that nature. And then you'll see them again. And their eyes aren't quite as bright because they're going through something again and they need support, and they come for the support. Always going to have that. I don't care what kind of church you are. But that is one of the signs, if you would, of a church in residence. A church in residence is very concerned, most of the time, about cash flow and about money. And it is not only true of a church in residence, but it's also true of a church without walls. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It's where do you concentrate your focus? Do you worry about the money? Do you worry about the cash flow? Does the board worry about it? Or are you saying, okay, fine, it is what it is, and I'm not going to worry about it because Jesus said something about that. He said, don't worry, it's not going to do any good anyway. Okay, right? Mark Twain said 80% of what you worry about never happens. And so as we look at that, we kind of say to ourselves, but it's my responsibility to worry about it. And that's true of the board and the church. So I'm not just picking on the board this morning, David. And so anyway, we do that. And if we're not careful, it becomes the number one thing in the church. And when it becomes the number one thing in the church, it starts to drive the church in a different way. Not with bad intentions, it just happens. And so what we're really doing is not living in our faith, we are living in our human condition as a ministry, as a church. And so we have this church in residence that is also, most of the time, either minister-centric, meaning the minister is it, and you can have a church of 1,000 people and they can be a church in residence, or they may also be church-centric. The institution is more important than the people. Now, they won't say that, but they act that way, and you can pick it up. Now, I'm not accusing you folks of anything, okay? I'm just sharing this message about what people can be like and how we can be a church in residence, and that sometimes it just gets in the way. Now, for hundreds of years, that's the way churches operated. It was the norm. And today we see it. Most congregations, when they start up in time, start to talk about the building they're going to build. Okay? That's the first sign of being a church in residence. And it may be a good thing to do. I'll give you an example. Unity of Richmond, which is where I'm from, just down the road here, we came into the church and we wanted to be a church without walls. It was a theme of ours. I picked it up from Tom Bandy. I've talked to him a number of times about it, gone to a few seminars on it, and it was kind of, that's where we want to go. That's where Vicki, when I say Vicki and my wife, who is now retired just this year, were co-ministers for 10 years there. And so that was our theme. But you know, the most interesting thing happened is it stayed as our theme. It's continued as our theme. But in the middle, we did a building campaign and built walls. We added walls. Now, what was the purpose for that? And it was to be a church without walls. And I'll explain that in a few minutes, okay? So it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with a building plan. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong taking care of your property. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with those kinds of things that we do. It just simply says, or is that the number one thing that I'm doing? Do I just want a church to fill it up? Or do I want a church that operates in such a way it can move out into the community? So everybody understands, I think, basically what a church in residence is. And most of us have been members of those churches through the years. Now, today, because of a lot of different reasons, it is really important, and it may not be the church without walls, that's my terminology, but it's important to become something different. Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore said that unity was a movement, an educational movement, guided and driven by Jesus Christ consciousness. That's not the exact words, but that's the meaning of it. And a church without walls should be seen more as a movement than an institution. A movement is flexible. A movement may change its goals at times because the goals that they set initially, times have changed and they need to change them to be in alignment with what's going on in the world. Now, I know we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in the human condition. But I am in the human condition. And so the good things that I can use to promote transformational lives, I should use that are in the human condition. You know, I don't say, well, I'm not going to have an iPhone because they didn't have them when my parents were going to church and we shouldn't have them anymore, okay? I'm not going to use the internet because it's just too confusing. I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. Those kind of things. And those kind of sound silly now, right? You know, it was only 10 years ago that the iPhone was invented. 10 years ago. My granddaughter doesn't believe that. She thought it's been around just about all of her life. It hadn't quite, but close. And so we have to understand that the changes that are taking place are going to mean that the church must change in how it operates. There are now about 5 generations, maybe 6 generations. And are they different? I found out that I finally made it to the traditionalist generation at my age, okay? The other day I was listening to a guy on this. I'm a traditionalist, so I'm over 70 and moving wherever I am in life, but I am in the traditionalist, which means I'm supposed to be conservative. Now, I kind of break the mold on that. I'm supposed to not be in love with the internet and our iPhones and all technology and computers. And I kind of break the mold on that, thank goodness. I'm not good with them, I just happen to like them. And so it seems, and they see their churches as somewhat conservative. Okay, they want to sing out of the hymnal, so to speak. And that's understandable. Even the unity hymnal. Not long, I mean, we haven't had a unity hymnal in our church for about 7 years in the pews and or on the seats. And we took them out, and I don't guess it was 6 months ago, somebody said, when are we going to get our hymnals back, okay? And the answer was, well, we put it on PowerPoint and we use them sometimes. But basically, we are attached to that kind of thing. And then there is the baby boomer. And the baby boomers really, and many of you are baby boomers. And the baby boomers is an interesting group because the baby boomers have seen all the changes that go on. And they started off, us traditionalists, started off as radicals. Okay? I mean, I still know baby boomers who talk about the 60s, talk about demonstrating, talk about California, you know? Yeah, see, yeah, there you go. They even color their hair. And anyway, I'm only kidding. But it's true. And it's lovely. But they are more interested. That baby boomer group did an interesting thing. I thought, because I was just a few years older than they were, that they were kind of radical. I thought, well, they'll never find a job. You know, they're just going to be beatniks the rest of their lives. And the truth is that they really became, and were at the time, really good citizens. But they've taken on the idea that work is important. There was a change that took place. They saw society differently, and they became part of the government that we have now that they were kind of reacting to at that time. And I'm not so sure that's worked out the way they wanted, but it still happened. Okay, whoever they are. And the baby boomers, I should say it that way. And then there's the X generation, came after the baby boomers. Now, the X generation, baby boomers, I think, if I got it right, represent 76 million people, or 56 million people, okay? Traditionalists aren't quite that large, around 26 million, and going down. And I don't like to remind myself of that, but anyway. And then you have this group of X generation that's around 56 million people. Then there is the millennial group. What do you think that number is?
Very large.
It's the largest group of all?
Oh, it is the largest group.
Bigger than the baby boomers. It's now 76 million.
Wow. Then they're 20.
And here's the thing. In 10 to 15 years, they're going to be people either in your church or out of your church. Now, I don't think the church should center everything on the millennials. That would be a mistake. That would be just serving one group. And then there's a group after that, which is called the iGen now. They're starting to call them the iGen. Okay, the iGen are the people who were born from 2007 on, who only know the iPhone. And here's an interesting difference. I know for me, but that iGen group versus even the millennials, when they get an iPhone, and they're only about 10, 11, 12 years old now, okay? Hit Facebook 150 times a day. Yeah.
150 times.
Yeah, 150 times a day. I only opened it by accident. They don't use the internet very much. And they text. And this is true of millennials too. They text, they don't like to write or call.
They don't call.
No, they don't call. My granddaughter, if I tried, one time I called her and she says, "Who's speaking?" What's this? So we have these groups of generation. Now, I talk about them simply because there is a change that's taking place. In America today, there are more people who are non-churched than there are who are churched as they grow up. 10 to 15 years from now, that non-church group are going to be the dominant group in America. And so, do we want to create a church in residence so we can draw them in? And that's one of the signs of a church in residence. I want to draw them to me. I want to bring them in. Or do we want to create an opportunity where they want to be a part because we have reached out in such a way that it speaks to them? And I think that is kind of a understanding. The answer to that's pretty basic, okay? But it's important. So what's going to happen is a church without walls is a church that is, and you've heard maybe this before, mission-centric. What is our mission? What is ours to do? How do we do it? Does what we are doing today align with that mission? Are we towing the mark? Are we making this happen? The mission is so important. And so mission-centric means a movement, not a church. Back to what Charles Fillmore said 100 years ago. It's a movement. We are a movement. You know, the greatest illustration in unity of something that was not moving was we had a ministerial program in Unity Village in Lee Summit. And that ministerial program went from 60 people that were in it a year when I was in it, down to about 14 people. And they were not wanting to change that. And in order to go to school, you had to give up your job. You had to give up your family sometimes. You had to move to Lee Summit. You had to live there for 2 to 3 years, 3 years at the end of it, 3 years, and be there the whole time. And it cost about $25,000 to $26,000 in tuition, not counting your living expenses. And most people got some help, but not everybody, on tuition. Well, everybody got a little help, but not much. So they continued that process, and what happened was the attendance, that's kind of that was like a church in residence, if you think about it that way. This is the way we do it. You come to us, and we will educate you well, and you will be a minister, and then everything will be hunky-dory. Really. And so it drove. By the time it got down to 6 people, Unity Village, and that's different than Unity Worldwide Ministries. They're 2 different organizations. Unity Village called us, and we were in a board meeting. And they said, we have 2 things we would like to do. One, we would like to give you as use the education building, because we were off campus, what we called off campus. We were down the street. Unity Worldwide Ministries had our own building. We would like that, and you can have it for $1 a year rent. And the second thing we want you to do is we're giving you the school to take over. Because we're dropping it. We're stopping. We're losing money on it. We can't afford it. And we knew there had to be an educational process in Unity, okay? And we have it with licensed Unity teachers, but we knew we had to have it for ministers for the future. And so what we did is we spent a year and a half exactly putting together a program for online learning. And it's called Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute. You can take SEE classes there. You can take ministerial classes there. You don't have to leave your home. And we thought in the first year that we would have maybe 15 to 20 ministerial students sign up. And we thought that we'd probably have maybe 100 people total sign up, including those ministerial students. In the first year, we had over 250 people sign up. And today we have about 50 people in the ministerial program who are moving through that program. All in a year and a half. Okay, so a year since we opened the program. So we stepped into, in essence, being a school without walls, and look what happened. And that's symbolic of what's going to happen with churches. A church without walls moves outside of itself in order to bring people in. And they're not as worried about bringing people in, but it will happen automatically. We live stream at Unity of Richmond. Some of the people said, well, you know, I don't know if that's a good idea or not, because people are going to want to watch it at home. And that's true, some do, because it's convenient. People who are sick watch it at home. But the other thing that happens is maybe once a month, somebody comes to the church, first time there, and says to me, I have a question about your message last week. But they just raised up that this first time there, right? So they watched me, or whomever was speaking, on live streaming, or during the week, watched that and then came to the church because they felt something pulling them there. So we were reaching out to them in a way that they could understand. So it really grows your church. That's what we know about live streaming. Most churches know that. The other thing is that a church without walls really is, their main focus is on outreach. And I use the word outreach. I've used the word mission before, but that sounds kind of Baptist and Methodist, okay? And people think, oh, you're out there trying to save souls, and no, that's not what we're doing. We're out there helping souls, loving souls, supporting souls, and not giving them our message. And so outreach becomes very important. It's our largest team now in our church. And the way our team works is if you have an outreach program that you want to bring in, you join that team. And then you become the chair of that team. Of that, not the outreach team, but of the program you're doing. So every person sitting on the team is a chair. We have a chair for the food drive. Some of our things are pretty normal. We have a chair for Caritas, which is where we house people twice a year in our building for a week. And we bring in families and do that. And we feed them, take care of them. But Caritas is a program that people are only in for about 3 months, because at the end of the 3 months they have a job and they have a house to live in. So we're just helping them through the process. And we selected that for that reason. Kind of, you teach them to fish, not just give them fish. But they have to have some substance before that. And so we do that. We have the toy drive. We at Christmas time have a Christmas meal in our church where we invite people in the community who don't have family to come. We have 50, 70 people come up for Christmas. And I thought, there won't be many people there. And for us, that's a pretty good sized crowd to feed. So 60 or 70 people show up on Christmas Day because there's nobody in town that they know personally. And sometimes they're single folks. And sometimes they're millennials. Okay? Because they've heard about it and they would just like to be with people. One thing we have in common with all generations, we like to be with one another, most of us. We love people. Millennials, they say, grow up loving themselves as a whole. And the iGen is even stronger. And so we have programs of that nature, and it goes, we must have 15 programs of that nature, okay, in our church. When Vicki and I came there, they had one, and it was food drive, which is wonderful. But they really sold us on the fact that they wanted to do more, and they have. And so the fellowship committee, which is important, isn't as big as our outreach team. And it used to be the largest thing in our church. Okay? And people bring snacks once a week, and then every 5th Sunday we have a potluck. That's how we operate ours. It keeps it real simple. And the interesting thing is, there are volunteers who show up on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Mondays to clean fellowship hall after we've used it. We've not solicited one. And we've now, for 4 years running, had somebody who comes in and volunteers to do that on a regular basis. We don't even manage it. They just show up. Because it's what turns them on. And so a church without walls offers opportunities within the church that turns people on because they're doing what they want to do. It's not a church that says, oh my God, I need an usher today. I see you standing there. Go right over there and stand there and take care of it, okay? Now, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen every once in a while on Sunday. But that's not what we're trying to do. We say, if you'd like to be an usher and really want to greet people, then let us know. And we'll put you in that position. So we still have all the fundamental things you have to do to run a church. But what we're really running is a ministry. A ministry. And so this church without walls reaches out to people where they are. A church without walls will pop up in many different ways. And let me just give you one in closing. There's a program called Fresh Expressions or New Expressions. We call it Unique Expressions. Unity is a part of it. There are about 30 denominations that support it overall. And what's happened is that they got the idea from a skateboarding organization in England. Every Saturday and Sunday, in this particular area in England, people come together to skateboard. And one person was skateboarding and started talking to people about God. And they got general discussions going. And now what they have is on Sunday mornings, or whenever they want to do it, they have a skateboarding service. They pray together, they go skateboard, they come back and they share their experience of skateboarding and how that might be meditative in nature. Just don't close your eyes when you're doing it. But you see, isn't that different? In the United States, there is a McDonald's where the prostitutes gather, they found out. And this person would go in and say, oh, by the way, nice to meet you. I'm going to church. You're welcome to come anytime you'd like. Very open, wasn't judgmental. And eventually, it was a woman actually, she realized they weren't going to come. I mean, after a number of Sundays, nobody showed up. So she said to them, you know, I've been invited. Would it be okay if I stay here and we just talk about God? We just talk about whatever you'd like to talk about on Sunday mornings? And now every Sunday morning at that Burger King or McDonald's, this group of prostitutes come together and they worship together. That's reaching out. That's a church without walls. Now, a lot of ways we're going to do that. We don't know how all of them. We're looking at that in Unity now. We have a focus group that I put together in the Unity movement that is looking out 10 years and saying, what should we look like 10 years from now so that we are serving people? We're not going to stop wanting to transform lives. We're not going to stop wanting to share the message that God is unconditional love. We're not going to stop saying yes if people want to meet in a building. But we're going to be more than that. We're going to be bigger than that. And we're going to grow this movement. We're going to change with times so that we can grow this movement. Because you see, 15 years from now, the millennial is going to be the 40-year-old. And the iGen is going to be the 30-year-old, or thereabouts. And so, what is that going to look like? How do we have to change to do that? And that's why I talk about the church without walls. And so the question is, do I want to stay as a church in residence, and by the way, eventually go out of business? It will happen. Or do I want to become a church without walls, or any other terminology you want to use? Do I want to meet the needs of the people in the community, even in the world? And so today, later, after this service, we're going to talk about the idea of who do you want to be? Who are you? And what do you want to look like? And what is going to be important in the future for you? So that you stay alive, you stay vibrant, you stay together, but yet you are even serving more people. Now, I'll bet you haven't heard this talked about in a lot of years, but you know, Jesus said, go you out and teach the world what I have taught you. That's what he really said. He didn't say go out and baptize everybody in the name of Jesus Christ. He didn't even use that name. If he used the word baptize, he meant not immerse, I don't believe. But if you look up in Greek and Aramaic, it means to share who I am and what I am in consciousness. That's what he talked about. That command is as big a command for us as is for anybody else. We interpret it differently, we share it differently, and because of that, I believe that as we join with other folks around the world, and we're going to have to do that too, we will create a world that works for all. Thank you.